All right, well, welcome to another edition of the Sports Guys. This is a very special episode because tonight, in the history of sports episodes that we've been doing in this series, we're taking on a very special sport, and it's the only sport that America can really call its own. 100% of the sport was invented here, grown here, and developed here. And now, of course, it's one of the biggest international sports there is, but that's basketball. And so we're going to get into the history of it, the rules of it, the popularity of it, why it's grown so fast, and how it became essentially the second most popular sport behind soccer in the world, even more popular than American football in terms of global. So, Robbie, what's your first kind of recollection of basketball, both college and pro? How old do you think you were? What do you remember for those first kind of times you started to become aware of the game?
I think I was somewhere around 5 or 6, and I chose my background for the person that influenced me at the beginning when I had really never watched basketball before. We lived overseas when we were little, and so we were in and out of American culture. And I remember that I guess probably 6 or 7, and it was Dr. J. He was. I remember watching some guys doing some stuff in basketball, and then all of a sudden, this guy just captivated my my vision towards the TV, and I was watching Dr. J do things that the other guys couldn't do, and it was really special. And at that moment, I realized some people are a little better at this than others, and
Mhm.
it was I could tell there was something different about him, and just watching him play was so cool. And of course, he came before Jordan, well before Jordan, but there were a lot of players after that. But he captivated me in a way that really was memorable.
That's great. For me, it was really around 1980. I was 11. I had been aware of basketball before that. We had played it as boys out on the playground and things like that, and in school and in gym. But I didn't really, pay attention to it as a real sport in terms of being a fan until I saw Ralph Sampson play with Virginia. And this was 1980, and they had a real powerhouse squad. And he was the National Player of the Year 2 years in a row, and completely put Virginia basketball on the map. Terry Holland and all his boys. And so that for me just completely took basketball from essentially a non-factor to something I was really interested in. Then I turned my attention to the pros. And at that time, you had Magic Johnson, and you had Showtime with the Lakers, and you had Bird with the Celtics, and you had just so many great players in the NBA at that time. It was really
Yeah.
kind of a golden age for the NBA. And this was really just before Michael Jordan came in. And of course, after he came in, it just completely exploded. But for me, it was Ralph Sampson and the Lakers and Celtics kind of matchups that they had almost every year in the finals. This really got me interested.
hmm Yeah, I mean, the first time we saw a live game was Ralph Sampson, and that was amazing to watch a 7'4" person. I had never seen that live, I don't think, in person, and that was real special. Really good stuff.
And to play against Patrick Ewing, that was just unbelievable.
Yeah,
See
yeah.
these two guys going at it. You knew they'd be legends. You knew that they'd both probably be Hall of Famers and be very high picks. And so, so those were my first recollections. And then after that, of course, when you're a young boy and you see those guys you really admire and look up to, and they're kind of like your heroes, you start trying to play like them on the playground, right? And so I was trying the skyhook, and I was trying to play defense like these guys. I was trying to pass like Magic, and so that's just part of the deal. As you're becoming a fan, you start to try to emulate it out on the playground.
hmm
So
I couldn't
anything,
emulate Dr. J, but flying
right?
out of bounds and laying it in while you're in the air, out of bounds.
So how do you think the game has changed over the years, both the college game and the pro game? And what do you think's been good? What do you think's not been so good in terms of changes?
Well, there's been a very steady progression of athleticism that has just been decade after decade, just more and more athletic until we're at a point now where I think it might be slightly less athletic and a little more skilled shooters. And I kind of feel like it's going to swing back a little. You know, I've heard some players who are incredibly good stars, huge stars, are saying that they're not going to really dunk anymore. and I think that's just really bad for the game because that's a special part of the game. But I can understand it. It's a very violent collision inside sometimes. You know, if you're making business decisions, it's a lot easier to bomb threes from way outside. So I think there's been a lot of different eras, and each one was more athletic than the last. And now we're at a point where you have athletic big men who can shoot threes and do all that. So there's just a very specialized set of players now. Um,
I think
that
the scoring has gone up a lot in both leagues, both college and pro, except for when you're playing our Virginia Cavaliers who play the pack line. It's really they keep most teams below their average, but defense is hard to come by in both leagues. Defense is still played a little bit more on the college level, but the only time we really see defense is in the NBA playoffs.
Mhm.
Because in the regular season, they just don't play it. It's not worth it. Not worth their time. Every game's 140 to 133. And the 3-pointer is kind of taken over. You've complained about that quite a bit. That it takes a
Mhm.
lot of the X's and O's out of the game. But I've noticed a little bit of the X's and O's and some of the plays coming back in this year in the NBA.
Yeah, I think so. Mid-range jumper making a comeback this year, last 2 years. Feels like there's a little more of a balancing of how the game is played. It was for a while inside outside game when they added the 3-point shot. It was an important part of the overall strategy. And in the last 10 years, the 3-pointer is almost the entire strategy. And just basically getting a 3-pointer off and open to take that shot. So people will drive to the basket having no intention of shooting it, just so they can kick it out. And the step back three, these things are all products of the value that's been placed on 3-point shooting. But you know, the athleticism that has uh, been there, I think they're just as good athletes now as they've ever been. And I think they could go inside if they wanted and bring back some physicality. And it kind of feels like they are a little bit. So that's kind of nice. I don't
I don't
really
know
want to
if
return to the days where the Pistons were throwing Michael Jordan into the third row. I don't That's not necessary, but I think hard fouls are okay. And you know,
I think today you have more good athletes in the league that
yeah.
are spread across more teams, but you might not have quite the stars we used to have. So we used to have like 5 or 6 guys that were just all world, all everything, clear Hall of Fame type players. Today you've got, maybe 50 guys that would be all-star type players, but maybe only 2 or 3 that are really Hall of Fame.
Well,
So
I've heard Colin Cowherd talk about this, that the NBA does better when it has dynasties. And I don't agree with that. I think that it's pretty exciting when OKC is playing Indiana, and then maybe the next year you have Memphis against the Lakers. I don't know. Like, I don't want. I like it that there's no dynasties.
mhm.
If there have been, it's been pretty recent. Golden State, of course, but I just think that the league's in a healthier place when you can kind of rotate around where the championships are being played.
Now the NFL has gone to a system where they're trying to eliminate a lot of the physicality, especially against quarterbacks and wide receivers and others, because they want to see more scoring. And clearly
It's
that's
not
happened,
just that; it's trying to preserve their stars.
right?
In the NFL, that for a while there, they just had every star going out, every quarterback going out. It's just not the same game when your starting quarterback is hurt. I mean, it's just
Well, but it's
you're
the same thing in the NBA. They have clearly
yeah,
favored the offense. They're
yeah.
finding ways to have ticky tack fouls. So, do you think it's gone too far the other way? I mean, we don't need Lambeer, but do we need a little bit more physicality in the game?
I'd like to see a little bit more physicality, but I don't want to swing all the way back. Yeah.
So, not all the way back to Rodman.
No, no, where the brawls and people slamming each other to the floor and nah, uh,
I mean,
no,
it was a
that's
different game when you played the Pistons. I mean, it was basically like rugby
yeah,
almost. It
yeah,
was like
yep.
it was a
The
full
level
contact.
of the fouling was so ridiculous that they've added flagrant fouls since then. They didn't have a lot of that back then. So
Hmm. Yeah, I think that they're trying to find that perfect balance. They haven't quite found it yet. Um, you do see a lot of ticky tack fouls. They do let them play a little bit more in the playoffs, which is good.
It is good.
I've noticed that they don't call nearly as many fouls in the playoffs. They don't want to be the
Yeah.
reason that a game decides in the last minute or so.
Yeah.
So,
It's
but
more enjoyable basketball in the playoffs,
it
you
is.
know?
I really have
Good.
enjoyed this year's NBA playoffs more than I have in a couple of years. I think it's
Yeah,
been a really good run.
I agree. Last I don't know, last couple years have been good. I didn't really like when Golden State was just unbeatable and they were just bombing threes all the time. For me, that was not as enjoyable, but if you're a Golden State fan, I'm sure you loved it. And that's, of course, makes sense. But I think it's in a better place now.
It feels like we have more parity in the NBA and we have
hmm
less parity in college because I know people are really worried we're going to lose March Madness and what makes the magic of that first weekend. Um,
I don't know if there's less parity. I know that this year there was less parity, but I think generally speaking, that was an anomaly. I don't think that that's normal. I think you're going
mhm,
to still see twos beating 15s occasionally. And it just
mhm,
didn't happen this year much, but
mhm,
it wasn't as mad as some of the madness years. But I think there's still parity there in the tournament. But yeah, I think the NBA is in a pretty healthy place uh, as it's moving away from bombing threes at all costs. Every single time down the court, you just pass it around until somebody's open for three and no defense. I think there's a much healthier way to play this game in a way that grows for the fans. It doesn't have to be 150 to 140. I don't think that that's a necessity. I think you can have a really exciting game that's 85 to 92 or something.
I'm
That
really
can be a really good game.
I'm really hoping they can keep the competitive parity in the college game because with NIL and transfer portal now, you got all the power conferences. They're going to sweep up all the players. They can pay the players, and there's a real concern there that the days of the mid major are over. So I think we're going to have to watch the next 2 or 3 years
We'll
to see
see.
if that happens. Yeah, see if we still get those upsets on day 1 and 2, which everybody loves.
I think they've only started just recently to get control of the runaway NIL salary cap situation. It's a free for all. It's a wild west. Every year, every player is a free agent. I think they're in the process of getting control of it. It's going to take 5 years, but I think once that happens, everything will settle down. And we were talking about it this morning on the way to work. Go figure. We're talking about sports. If you haven't been on our program very much, or you're new to our program, we often refer to the fact that we started this as a every morning drive to work conversation that we decided, let's throw it on a podcast and let the 17 members of our family watch it. And that drive this morning was no different. It was just like any other, and we talked about um, that, and it was it was interesting conversation.
For sure. Well, let's go dive into the history of basketball. Here we go. All right. Well, let's go ahead and do a call out to our sponsor for tonight, and that is Square. And they are the credit card processing company. Really happy to have them on board with the Sports Guyz. And they offer a solution that's so easy. You can plug their little mag stripe into your phone. You can plug it into your iPad. You can get the standalone station if you actually have a physical space for your business. Lots of different solutions and ways to do the Square solution so you can take credit card payments on the run or even in your location. So, Robbie, what do you think of Square and what have you done in terms of interacting with it?
Oh, it's so great. I'm starting to run into it all over the place. Not only do they have POS systems, but they have the handhelds. But I think they really got a foothold in the mobile space with the ones that you can hook to your phone, and you can
Mm-hmm.
either swipe the strip, I mean, or you can do the contactless, the chip reader,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so useful. There's a couple of times recently that come to mind. One was we were in Oak Island at the beach, and they have this big festival thing every week, pretty much with live music, and they have all these vendors, and all the vendors were using them, and it was so cool to watch, and it's so useful because people are really not carrying cash much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing was recently, my friend, a work colleague, she sells crafts at that kind of thing as well. And I helped
Mhm.
her pick out the square contact list with the chip reader, and
Mhm.
she's going to use it at the next event, and she's so excited. So it's pretty cool. It's really
That's
cool.
great.
So
That's great.
useful. Great for your business.
It allows you to do the credit card swipe, but it has some other functionality I didn't know about. It allows you to keep customer profiles. It allows you to hook
Yes.
directly into your bank account. It actually has an accounting function, so you can actually do small bookkeeping for your business. All the different functions you can imagine you need in your back office. So Square is more than just a credit card swiper, but obviously that's what it's known for.
It's fantastic.
So guys, go to squareup.up.com and check out Square. You can get started. It's free software and free solution in terms of sign up. The only thing that costs money is the device itself. So, and they're actually relatively inexpensive. And then
Very inexpensive.
they take a small percentage of every transaction. So that's how they get paid. So really for you, it's almost free to sign up. So
And
you
my
really
colleague
can't.
was up and running in minutes. It was crazy. It was so cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. So guys, check out Square and we'll see you guys next time.
See.
So this is our basketball history, rules, and popularity of the game, episode 65, Robbie. You see a great picture there on the top left. That's the National Basketball Association. That was their first logo
Mhm.
some 80
Cool.
years ago now. And then a great picture just below that of the man who actually invented this game, and that is James Naismith.
Mhm.
And he's holding the first basketball, which actually had laces on it because he got the idea of the ball from a rugby ball. So
Mhm.
that's why it has laces on it. And you can see he's there with one of his students at the school where he invented it, holding the peach basket and having her shoot the ball into the peach basket. So that's
Mhm.
literally what basketball used to look like. And of course, now we know what the game looks like today and how it's evolved. Then on the bottom there, you've got the two greatest players ever, most people believe. That's LeBron James in his Cavaliers gear. And then that's a really early picture of Michael Jordan when he just entered the league and he just signed his shoe deal with Nike. And he's got the Air Jordan shirt on. And you see his Air Jordan logo there, which is the Jumpman logo, which is maybe one of the most famous logos in the world. Then you got a picture bottom right of what that peach basket looks like and that first ball, which is pretty incredible. It wasn't even round. Like I don't know how they bounced it, Robbie.
It's hard to imagine how you would dribble that.
Yeah, because every time it hits the laces, it goes sideways, right? But
Yeah.
you can see what that ball looked like compared to what the current ball looks like and what that evolution was. Pretty incredible. And then finally, up on the top right there, a great picture of the current tallest guy in the league, Wemby, uh, doing the skyhook after his all-time idol, which is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So the
Mhm.
two of them are two of the great skyhookers, along with Ralph Sampson and a couple of others. So pretty cool to see him trying to bring that back into the game. So any overall thoughts about some of these epic photos?
It's just been a really cool historical run for this sport. I do think Jordan and LeBron are probably the two greatest ever. It's cool to watch how much the game has evolved, and then some pieces are still relatively similar. So, but the height and the athleticism is, I don't think they could foresee what was coming.
You know, it's been really fun to watch the debate of these two great players over the years, and then some of the others they think should sneak in there. You know, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, the Magic Johnsons, the Larry Birds, these guys that people think should be considered. But you have the LeBron lovers who are like, you know, Jordan can't hold his jock strap, and then vice versa. You know, LeBron would get crushed in the old game with the Pistons and all the guys that Jordan had to face. So I don't know. Will you ever really be able to settle this debate? I don't know. You're always going to have
Not
people
really.
in camp or the other because they really
I
played in
think there's
different.
a certain amount of recency bias that I'm always aware of. So everybody always thinks they're watching the greatest ever right now. But in our case, we actually did get to watch these two, and I do think they're the two best ever. But I think modern generations do have a recency bias for LeBron over Michael, and that doesn't make sense because I think Michael was the greatest player of all time.
I do too. And Michael was 6-0 in finals. LeBron has, you know, he's won four, but he's also lost four. So he's got
Yeah.
kind of a mixed record there. But I will say LeBron's 5 inches taller, and you can see how he's built. And he's just physically a freak.
Well, he's physically superior to almost any other player um, that has ever lived.
I
And
don't know if
what's
anyone's
so
really taken
special
care of.
about LeBron is that he can play defense on all 5 positions.
Has anyone
And
ever taken care of his body the way LeBron has? I mean, he's
there's rarely
41
ever
years.
been a player that can play defense on all 5 positions.
Yeah,
Jordan couldn't
absolutely.
do that. So
Magic.
offensively, Jordan defensively Jordan was great at guarding the 1 or 2,
Mhm.
and LeBron can guard all 5.
It's interesting. Both these guys have been Defensive Player of the Year twice.
Yeah.
And when they asked Jordan, what was the biggest thing you got, the 5 MVPs, or was it the 6 championships? He said the thing he was the most proud of was those 2 years he won the Defensive Player of the Year. That was
Mhm.
just really important to him. And I think that's a cool testament that was his most proud moment.
Yeah. Well, it showed that they're both very well-rounded players. They can do it all.
That's right. Looking at the history of basketball, game was created by James Naismith. You just saw a picture of him. He was a physical education instructor, and he created this game on December 1st, 1891, at the International Young Men's Christian Association, which is now called the YMCA. And this was at a training school in Springfield College, Springfield, Massachusetts. And he created the game to provide a less injury prone indoor sport for students during winter months. He was concerned for their physical activity. He wanted to give them something to do to actually get exercise. And obviously, they couldn't play football or baseball or soccer or other sports because there's a lot of snow in Springfield, Massachusetts. First game was played on December 21st, 1891, with 2 teams of 9 players each. So they were playing 9-on-9 at that time. Naismith initially used a soccer ball and peach baskets as the goals.
Hmm.
Unlike that of most popular sports, the origin of basketball is concise and all American. It's the only major sport strictly rooted in the United States. Its creation was met with great enthusiasm, and within a decade, basketball became a collegiate sport. Although the first professional league wasn't formed until 1898, so we're talking 7 years later. Growth of the sport was fairly slow for much of the early 1900s, and it finally got inclusion into the Olympic Games in 1936, and it absolutely exploded globally, not just in the U.S. So it was really interesting. And then after World War II, it went to the next level, even beyond that. Essentially, all the major countries started playing it. Formation of the National Basketball Association was in 1949, and you saw that original logo, what it looked like in 1949. Actually cemented the sport's cultural importance in the United States, where it's now played on all playgrounds in every state. And obviously, families played in their driveways, and they've got basketball goals on their garages and things like that. Basketball has now been embraced around the globe, notably Spain, Italy, China, Eastern Europe, and Australia. Those are the 5 areas other than the US where the sport is their most popular sport. So, thoughts about the general history of basketball, how fascinating this was.
Pretty interesting. 2 teams of 9 players each, so that's interesting.
Yeah,
And then sort of the early stages of development of the equipment, the ball and the
right.
baskets. It just, it's an evolution, and that's pretty cool. And then think about how the wars affected to the negative and to the positive. All your good athletes are suiting up and going to war. And then when you come out of war, you have this natural bump in pride and in um, a national pride, of course, but also an inward looking, feeling more safe. Everyone sort of going to the games, and baseball is big. And it was just a pretty interesting time to come out of the wars and to dive into something that was more
It's true.
positive, you
You
know?
think about it's very rare for a sport to get created at a YMCA. It's just a fun activity to help kids keep, have exercise. And to go from this peach basket and this really weird ball that has laces on it.
Yeah.
And within a decade, there was a professional league, and it was being played by 20 colleges who formed a league. That was just within one decade. And then
That's pretty hot. That's a
a
hot
couple,
sport.
and then a couple decades later, it's in the Olympic Games. And then
Yeah.
about a decade later, World War II ends, and it just explodes around the world, becomes one of the most popular sports. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That-
That's
That's
cool.
a fast rise. We're not talking like hundreds of years.
Right.
So pretty incredible.
Most sports don't grow that quickly, that fast.
That's right. So Naismith, let's talk about him individually. He was the inventor of basketball. He was a Canadian-American sports coach and innovator, and he was best known for inventing basketball. He also designed the first football helmet, which I thought was really interesting. He was
Yeah,
involved
that's cool.
in football as well. And he also was the first person to establish the basketball program at the University of Kansas, which, of course, we know that's a very legendary program even still today.
Mm-hmm.
Naismith developed basketball while teaching at that YMCA we mentioned in Springfield, Massachusetts, creating the game to provide an engaging indoor sport during the winter months. He was born in Almonte, Ontario, Canada, November 6, 1861, and he later studied at McGill University and then the Presbyterian College of Montreal. And then he pursued lay ministry through sport and enrolled at the YMCA Training School in Springfield. So how fascinating that this guy who created this sport in America was actually Canadian. That's something I did not realize till I started to research this. You see some great pictures there with him with the original ball and basket, and then you see they started to experiment with putting the basket on another basket and using it as kind of a way to shoot at it. So they were coming up with all kinds of ways to develop the sport, I guess you could say.
I'm kind of surprised that our Canadian friends don't bring this up a little bit more.
You would think, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, we kind of claimed it because it was in Springfield, Massachusetts, and the first players were American, of course.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, a really fascinating, interesting history behind James Naismith. Some of the old games it's based on, it's really interesting. There were some that share similarities, and particularly some of the Mesoamerican games, which are some of the Indians. And you see a picture there to the right of one of the games that was called Pocketuck. And it was involved this big arena, and they had actually stone hoops, and they would actually try to shoot the ball into these stone hoops on either side. Very similar to, it would look like a basketball game, except it looked more like a Bill Laimbeer Pistons game because there was tackling involved. You could use your hips, your shoulders, your elbows. You could push people over, trying to get at the ball. Very physical game, but
like
basically
rugby and basketball combined.
That's right. So as these Indians, they also created lacrosse, but they created this game called Pocketuck, which is essentially basketball, but with tackling and pushing and being very physical, trying to get that ball into the hoop. So that was pretty interesting. And then there was this other game in early America called Duck on a Rock. You see a picture of it there on the bottom left, what it was. And you would stand around and you essentially had these rocks with a rock on top of it. And you would get taking a shot at the other person on the other side of the field's rock to try to knock it off. And if you knocked it off, you would get a point. And the person who was guarding their rock could slap the ball away and not let it hit their rock, kind of like playing defense around a rim.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Duck on a Rock, and apparently it's very popular at kids' schools. Then there was a game called Ring Ball, which is a South African sport developed from basketball in 1907. There was korfball, netball, and pearl ball. These were all games related to basketball, various rules and equipment. You had, there were some elements of rugby and lacrosse that were very similar, including the jump ball from lacrosse. That was a popular rule back then. And then there were some other ancient games that were found. And there was one in 1591 that was a game that they were mentioning very similar to basketball. So thoughts about some of these early games and kind of if any of these had a direct impact on Naismith or if he just kind of invented it himself.
I guess it's just kind of cool to see the evolution of different ideas. It's sort of like our strange sports episodes, and you end up refining it and make more sense and having more standardized rules and taking some of the violence out of it to make it more kid friendly and stuff like that. That's pretty cool.
The interesting thing is you look at all these ancient games, and the one that's the most like basketball was the Indian Mesoamerican game, which was from 450 years ago. This game called Pocketuck was really the most similar to basketball.
Yeah.
So pretty cool to see the evolution. I'd never heard of Duck on a Rock either. Apparently it was in every school it was being played. The kids loved it.
It's kind of like bocce or something.
It is a little bit, but you're protecting your rock. So you can swat it away like a swat. So how did basketball get its name? You can see, by the way, a great picture there of the first basketball players. That's the 9-on-9 lineups of that first game in 1891 that Naismith actually refereed. So basketball's name is a direct result of the game's original objective and equipment. The game, invented by James Naismith, involved players trying to score by throwing a ball into a peach basket. The 2 peach baskets used as goals for the first game gave the sport its name, basketball. Upon returning from Christmas vacation, Mahan approached Dr. Naismith about the game once more. This is after several games had already been played that year. He asked Naismith what he intended to name the game, and Naismith admitted that he had only been focused on making the game, not naming it. After Naismith rejected the name Naismith Ball, saying the name would kill the game before it got going, he then said, "Why not call it basketball?" Dr. Naismith responded to this by saying, "We have a basket and a ball. It seems to me it would be a good name for it." So that's how he and his friend came up with the name.
Sometimes, the simplest thing is the way to go.
I think he's right. Naismith ball, that wouldn't really fit. It didn't make any sense, So really interesting to look
we'll
into.
never know also,
Possibly, yeah.
You just never know.
So it's
the marketing might be harder,
but yeah, it's true. It's true. So the rules of basketball scoring, you got field goals are worth 2 points inside the 3-point arc and 3 points outside the 3-point arc. Of course, for most of the history of basketball, there was no 3-point line. That's really a more recent invention. Free throws are worth 1 point. In terms of movement of the ball, players advance the ball by dribbling, bouncing the ball while moving, passing the ball or throwing it to a teammate, and throwing the ball to the basket for a shot. In terms of the shot clock in the NBA, WNBA, teams have 24 seconds to shoot the ball after gaining possession. So the idea there is to keep the game moving and not have people just stall ball it like they used to in the old Carolina days. You remember they used to have the 4 corners and just stall. Yeah. Jump ball, the game starts with a jump ball where players jump to tap the ball to their teammates for first possession. In terms of violations, some of the violations are traveling, where you run the ball without dribbling, palming the ball, double dribbling. These are some of the violations that cause a turnover. Fouls involve illegal contact like pushing, shoving, tripping an opponent, or even slapping their arm while they're shooting. Goaltending is a player cannot touch the ball while it's going down into the basket or is on the rim. Backcourt, once the ball enters the front court, it cannot be brought back into the backcourt. So that obviously also causes a turnover. And then out of bounds, balls goes out of bounds. The opposing team gets possession of the ball. So those are your basic rules of basketball as of today. Any thoughts about that before we move on to what the original rules were?
They're pretty straightforward. I guess we're all used to them now, so
yeah,
nothing.
I guess
I think the hardest one to understand is goaltending, probably, because you have to understand that it's in the cylinder.
I think goaltending and traveling. I think traveling is one that, especially little
traveling's
kids,
a little abstract as well. Yeah,
they have a hard time with. Your boys at 9 years old now probably know it, but I mean, when you're a real little kid, it takes a while to get to know that rule.
Yeah, they're getting to the point where they definitely don't travel anymore, but it's only recently,
Yeah, that's right. So the original rules of basketball by Naismith and his friend, they had 13 original rules. The first one is the ball may be thrown with one or both hands. And you think that sounds silly because today you know that's true. But I mean, back then you have to realize they're sitting in a gym and there's no rules at all. So you're coming up with, well, how do you throw it? Is it like a baseball where you throw it one hand? Or the ball may be batted, but never with a fist or a foot. So they didn't want it to be a football and they didn't want it to be a fist ball. Player cannot run with the ball. The player must throw it from spot on which he catches it. So you either have to dribble or pass it to somebody else. Ball must be held by the hands. No shouldering, holding, pushing, striking, or tripping in any way of an opponent. So you see they were already trying to take some of the physicality out of the game. Of course, he was building it for kids. A foul is striking at the ball with the fist. If either side makes 3 consecutive fouls, it shall count as a goal for the opponents. That's an interesting rule that we don't have anymore.
Yeah.
Some of these were really kind of old rules that obviously have fallen by the wayside. That's definitely one of them. Three fouls in a row is now a goal. A goal shall be made when the ball is thrown or batted from the ground into the basket. So I guess when you're making the original rules, you got to actually say that, you know.
Yeah.
When the ball goes out of bounds, it shall be thrown in by the first person touching it. That also is not a rule anymore. Yeah, the person who actually touches it gets to throw it in. The
Hmm.
umpire shall be the judge of the men and shall note the fouls. I love the way they wrote these. They're so funny.
Yeah.
The referee shall decide when the ball is in play, in bounds, and to what side it belongs. That kind of makes sense. The time shall be two 15-minute halves with 5 minutes rest in between. So that's your halftime. The side making the most goals in the time shall be declared the winner. So you can see the original rules. A goal was just 1 point. There was no 2-pointer. There was no 3-pointer. So
Hmm.
they were saying that the average game back in the 1890s was like 16, 14, that kind of thing. Those were the average
Yeah, it
games.
makes sense.
Yeah. Any thoughts about some of these original rules, some of the wild ones that we don't have anymore?
I mean, it's definitely fun to watch some of the ones that they got rid of. I'm sure they had good reasons for each one to go, but I mean, it's a good starting point when you're starting from scratch.
If they had this consecutive fouls rule when the Pistons were playing, they would have
Yeah,
lost every game.
I know. And the first person to touch it out of bounds has to throw it in.
Yeah, it's very strange. But pretty cool. There, most of the rules are pretty similar, I would say.
Yeah, pretty much.
Didn't change that much. So evolution of the basketball. You can look here on the bottom right what the original one looked like in 1891, then what it looked like in 94, 3 years later. It really looked like a rugby ball. In 37, this was 40 years later, it was starting to look a little bit more like a basketball. 1950, 71, 84, it was starting to really look like an NBA
You can
ball
see
now.
84, the marketing really started,
Yes, yes, that's
you
right.
know? Yeah.
84, then 2006, and then, of course, 2021 is really the ball we have today. And then on the left there are some of the original balls from the first 4 years of play. And they really look like rugby balls, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
With lacing and everything.
Mhm.
Again, I don't know what happens when you bounce on the laces, you know. I guess you get a really weird bounce. So, any thoughts about the evolution of this ball?
Just the marketing starting to kick in the 80s,
Hmm.
and how like, the very far left one, 1891, that looks like a volleyball that you'd play with at the beach or something,
That's right. It
and
does.
then the laces being on there is crazy.
I know. I mean, that really, I think he pretty much got the idea from a rugby ball because rugby was really popular
Or
then.
football.
The football, yeah. So the core of the basketball, also known as the bladder, is made of butyl rubber, which I thought was
Mm,
interesting. This type of
mhm.
rubber is ideal because it's highly resistant to air permeation, ensuring the ball retains its air pressure and maintains shape. The bladder is inflated and then wrapped with layers of nylon and polyester threads to reinforce its structure and give the ball its bounce. So it's interesting that they had found a way to find this type of rubber that would hold air in a lot better than everything else.
Hmm.
So, thoughts about that?
I mean, it's fascinating. You can tell that it would be important for a basketball to hold in air the way it's receiving pressure, bouncing against the grounds, all the way down the floor, and
If it didn't,
it,
you'd have to change out the ball probably like every couple
it
minutes,
would
right?
yeah, it would constantly be changed out. It would be very strange.
Mhm. I would love to try to bounce this 1891 ball. I just want to see what that feels like. I bet it feels really weird.
There might be a technique where you spin it so that the laces never hit.
Maybe.
So you put your hand on it like a football, and you push it straight downward so that the laces never
Mhm.
go down there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Play
Yeah,
around with it.
I wonder if you were to get an 1891 ball in kind of like the aftermarket now, as a collector. I wonder what that would cost. Get one of the original balls. I know they have them in the Basketball Hall of Fame, so you can go see them there.
Sure.
So some of the classic photos you can see on the top left there, what it looked like when they started to actually put the peach baskets up on a pole, actually start trying to shoot at it. So this is what original basketball would have looked like. And you can see some of the teams here. They eventually went to a 5-on-5 format. You can see girls also played it. There's a picture there in the bottom center where the girls are all actually sitting in the peach baskets themselves. And then on the top right there, the women are playing in their dresses in school. Mm-hmm. And then also women playing on the outdoor playground. And apparently the baskets back then were actually in grass. So they would play basketball in grass outside. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how difficult that would be to try to bounce the ball. Any thoughts about some of these classic photos?
And it's cool. I like that women got to play it too, and just to see the evolution. You can see kind of how it's moving towards modern basketball.
You can see why it got so popular, though. I mean, you could see in every school they'd be playing it. Every high school.
It just got most anybody could play it, and nobody there is obscenely tall, so everyone was sort of normal height, and height wasn't really quite the driving factor like it is now.
That's right. I assume having to shoot it into a peach basket, you'd have to have a technique where you couldn't throw it too hard or it would bounce out.
Right.
There's kind of a soft technique you'd have to do to get it in there and get it to stay. So it's really fascinating. So here you can see just some years later, some of these photos are from the 1920s and 30s. You can see that the game was starting to evolve, and you started to get guys who were 6'11", 6'9". You can see the baskets had really come along. They had real metal rims now. They had real nets up.
Yep.
And the game's really evolving through the 20s, 30s, 40s, into the 50s when you had the NBA. So, and you can see these guys were getting up close to the rim. They weren't really dunking quite yet, but they were getting close. So, any thoughts about this game as it developed?
You can see they're getting taller and more athletic. And the equipment is getting more standardized.
The ball's a little better. The nets are better.
Yeah. The rims and the backboards and stuff.
I like that picture there on the top right. You can see that's at a high school, and it still looks real old school. You can see the little stands where the kids were sitting with their parents.
Yeah.
And the game was just, coming along, being developed. So getting into the NBA age, on the top left there was the Minnesota Lakers. This was in the early 1950s. They had a center named George Mikan.
Yeah.
He was apparently one of the real greats back then in the 50s. Mm-hmm. You also had Jerry West there on the left guarding Pete Maravich, who people still talk about today as the greatest dribbler of all time.
And passer.
Pete Maravich, this is what Jerry West said about him. He said he was the most unique players I've ever played against. Never played against a player like him before or since. He was absolutely incredible with the basketball. The things he could do with the ball, nobody else could do. He wasn't the quickest guy in the world, but his hands were so quick. His ability to handle the ball was just phenomenal. If you took your eye off him for a second, he'd be gone. So,
yeah.
What do you think about some of these early pioneers? I mean, this is like early NBA days. These guys were.
It was really good basketball even then.
They were coming up with new techniques that had never been done before.
They weren't as athletic yet, but they were highly skilled.
And this is just probably his whole life in the gym or out on the playground, right? Well, that's how you get these techniques.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, if you look on the bottom left there, the career 10 rebound games, you have a lot of great players there. I found it interesting that you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was fifth on this list. He had 801 of these career 10 rebound games, which is pretty interesting. Karl Malone, Tim Duncan, a lot of these really great players. These were the greatest rebounders in the league and in league history.
Yeah.
And then on the bottom right there, you have Wilt Chamberlain after he made his way to the Lakers a little later in his career, and you have Jerry West on his right. And interestingly enough, Jerry West became president of the club for a long time as well. So these are real classic photos.
I was reading about Wilt Chamberlain, and it was fascinating. They used to have 48-minute games. He averaged in the 61-62 season. Listen to the season he had. He averaged 48.5 minutes a game. So he averaged more than a game because they were in overtime a bunch. But
Wow.
that's incredible. The next fact was that he averaged 50.4 points a game, which is unheard of. There was no 3-point shot. And he had his 100-point game that season too.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so what a season.
He was literally unstoppable. The
Wilt,
only guy who could touch him was Bill Russell.
Bill Russell, yeah,
And
defense.
those two guys were just completely unstoppable during their age.
Yeah.
And we're trading championships, by the way, back and forth. So another interesting photo here on the left, I thought this is cool. You were talking about the physicality of the game. These are the NBA's most feared enforcers. So tell me what you remember about some of these guys. You got Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Rodman, Xavier McDaniel, Latrell Sprewell, Ron Artest, Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley, Rick Mahorn, Kermit Washington, and Ben Wallace. I mean, these guys were the NBA's most feared enforcers on their teams.
Yeah, Mahorn and Rodman on the same team was crazy. And in Detroit with Laimbeer.
And these guys couldn't get away with it anymore, could they? I mean, really, with the way they would referee, you couldn't play that way anymore.
No, because the NBA doesn't want their stars hurt, and they realize they can protect their stars by having very tight rules. And people want to see, lots of scoring and high flying above the rim, not a lot of violence.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep, that makes sense.
The rules are meant to keep it tight and clean.
Right. So great picture there of Moses Malone. He was the first player ever to go straight from high school to the NBA. He was also the most traded player in NBA history, even today. He's been traded more than any other player. He only played 2 games for the Buffalo Braves. He was part of his chaotic movement around the league in his first couple of years. He was drafted in 1974, and between 74 and 76, his rights were owned by 6 different franchises, which is really wild. And he was a great player, but they said that he was a little bit of a diva, and he was a little difficult, and some of the coaches just didn't want to coach him. And so he would get on their clubs because he was so talented, and then they would deal with him for a couple of games, and they were basically finding ways to ship him out.
So, I wouldn't want to be his real estate agent.
No, not at all.
Oh, we just sold a house and closed on it. Oh, you got traded.
That's right. So then on the right there is one of the most epic games in NBA history. Wilt Chamberlain that night had 78 points and 43 rebounds. 43 rebounds.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the court, Elgin Baylor had 63 points, 31 rebounds, and 7 assists.
Yeah, he was a good one.
I mean, you imagine the score sheet in that game for these two guys? Unbelievable. 43 rebounds, Robbie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty incredible. So the biggest upset in history, on the left, 1966, Texas Western changed the sport forever with a win over the unbeatable Kentucky Wildcats, who had won essentially 3 years in a row without a loss. And they lose to this Division III school, Texas Western. And everyone thought that would always be the greatest upset ever until, and this is sick for me to say, but on December 23rd, 1982, Chaminade University defeated then number 1 Virginia Cavaliers 77-72 in Honolulu, Hawaii, which is their hometown. The win was considered the biggest upset ever because Chaminade was a small school with a student body of 850 students. And they were actually below Division III. They're NAIA, which is below Division III. And they beat Samson and the Virginia Cavaliers. I still can't believe it. The greatest upset in college history. And of course, it's against our school.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts? What do you remember about that? I remember Dad talking.
I don't remember a whole lot. I do remember it slightly a few years later, reflecting back on it. I don't remember too much live at that night, that time, but I remember it being a stunning revelation. I can't believe it happened, honestly.
They have 850 students.
Yeah, but Virginia had Ralph Sampson.
They barely had a team. It was like,
I don't know how it happened, honestly.
And then what was incredible was this was a exhibition game because Virginia was getting ready for a tournament the next day. So they played this as
Mhm.
an exhibition game. And Chaminade couldn't believe they did it either. And so they cut down the nets like they won the national championship or something.
It's the greatest
But
man in their history,
I
yeah.
kind of don't blame them. I mean, these guys were, I mean, they're basically rec players. This is like
Yeah.
intramural. And they beat Virginia. Oh, man, I can't believe that one. So, but this adds to the lore of the sport. So, as painful as it was for us Cavaliers fans, obviously makes a great story.
Mhm.
So, what do you think of this high school squad, Robbie? This was the 1996 USA Today High School All American team. You had Mike Bibby, you had Ronnie Fields, Kobe Bryant, Tim Thomas, Jermaine O'Neal, and Bobby Hurley. That's your high school all stars. I mean, it's
Pretty
just
wild.
pretty incredible. You think
Yeah.
about these guys, all like 17 years old, and the damage they ended up doing in college and in the pros later on.
Yeah.
Kobe being
Kobe
another
went
guy, by the
straight.
way, who went straight to the NBA.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the great Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell squaring up against each other. One on one side winning championships, and then of course Bill Russell still has the most rings of everybody. He has
Yeah.
11 championships, which I don't think will ever be broken. I
He was
cannot
amazing, and
imagine.
he was surrounded by a lot of talented players.
So this is when the Celtics and Lakers dynasties were so big. And then on the right there was very close to the end of Chamberlain's career when he broke the all-time rebound record with 21,722. And this was January 30th, 1972. So this is 3 months before you were born, Robbie.
Mhm.
He broke the rebound record. It has since been broken again, but was still obviously a big milestone. But what do you think it was like to watch these two legends go at each other?
Oh, it was a big treat. I mean, that was probably the first amazing, great matchup that there was.
I mean, that was worth the price of admission right there, just to watch those two guys.
Yeah. Yeah, they balanced each other out. They were just superior to everyone else, and so each team had one, and that was cool.
Very cool. Absolutely. Some other great pictures here. Lou Alcindor there on the bottom left when he made his decision after high school. He was the most recruited player at the time in college history and decided he would attend UCLA. And that was a huge bombshell announcement. Apparently, they let off every telecast on ABC, NBC, CBS with it that night. That's how big this was. That he
Yeah.
decided to go to UCLA. Also, in the 1972 draft, the Milwaukee Bucks made an impactful choice by selecting Julius Erving as the 12th overall pick. At that time, the Bucks already had formidable duo in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You can see him there. This is before he went to the Lakers. They also had Oscar Robertson, who had recently led the team to an NBA championship. So imagine they're going to add Julius Erving to these two guys coming into a championship. So the potential addition of Irving would have formed a legendary trio and would have been maybe the greatest group of players ever to grace the basketball court. However, fate had a different plan. Despite being drafted by the Bucks, Irving decided to sign a contract with the Atlanta Hawks for the 72-73 season and essentially denied the Bucks to have this dynasty. And because of it, the Hawks were fined a hefty sum of $25,000 a game in which Dr. J appeared because Milwaukee still retained his rights. So what are your thoughts about this controversy? How did this happen?
Well, I don't know all the ins and outs. I know that it kept a super team forming for the first time, probably. Uh, I don't know. I'm a big Dr. J fan, so it worked out
Yeah.
perfectly, of course. But
It did because later on he ended up getting traded from the Bucks, who he never played for, by the way, to of course the New Jersey Nets, and then he eventually made his way to the 76ers.
yep.
He spent most of his career with the Nets and the Sixers. So really interesting. I wonder why he made that decision. I'd love to talk to him about it, about why in the world he didn't go join the Bucks and win a couple rings.
I don't know. I'm sure he had his reason.
Could have easily done that. And then a great picture there on the right, Larry Legend. It's interesting to watch kids these days when they watch old highlight film of Larry Legend because he doesn't look like he'd be a dominant basketball player. Like if you just look at him,
Yeah.
but when you watch his clips, he was absolutely dominant in every phase of the game. He was
Yeah.
just incredibly well.
If you listen to his contemporaries from back then, they'll tell you how great he was.
He was just incredible. He was unbelievable on the ball. And you have guarding him there Dominique Wilkins, who was also a really fun player to watch, and won the dunk contest 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So really fun player there. Of course, we had his son play for UVA for a while. That was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Another picture there of Larry Legend on the left when he was at Indiana State, and he took them to the Final Four, which nobody could believe. They were a small school that had never been even in the tournament before. It takes them to the Final Four. And then you have a great picture there of Isaiah Thomas snipping the nets, the one championship Indiana won. That was a big deal for them. And then maybe the greatest shot ever in the NCAA tournament with 1.2 seconds left. Duke University down by 1 point, throws a full-length pass to him at the top of the key, catches it, turns, and sinks the shot for the win. And they call it the shot. So do you remember that actual happening?
Oh, yeah. I watched that one live. Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't even believe it.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I mean, this is what makes March Madness, are these types of moments.
That's right.
There's just nothing like it. So, and that's just pure joy in his face, too. Other great pictures there on the top left. You can see Wilt Chamberlain again with another 50. Look at this line, Robbie. 53 points, 32 rebounds, 24 blocks,
32 rebounds,
14 assists, and 11 steals. So he had a quintuple double. I've never heard of such a thing in my
11
life.
steals from a center.
He had a quintuple double.
Wow.
I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that was
Mm-mm.
possible. Wow. And then interesting, these bottom guys on the left here are the only 5 players in NBA history that appeared in the All-Star game every season they were in the NBA. So you have Yao Ming, 8 years, every single year. Julius Erving, 16. Jerry West, 14. Bob Pettit, 11. And Paul Arizin, 11. Every year they were in the league, they were in the All-Star game. So that's pretty cool. Great picture there of your Dr. J slicing them up.
Mm-hmm.
And then what a picture of Kobe. I mean, everyone remembers later in his career, he really became kind of a jump shooter, but what they don't remember was how unbelievably athletic this kid was.
Yeah.
He came out of high school. He was
Hard worker,
on the
too.
foul line. He was just so exciting, man. I mean, he was the most exciting thing since Jordan when he came out.
Oh, for sure.
And, what was interesting is he got drafted by my Charlotte Hornets, and he refused to play for him. So they ended up having to ship him to LA for about 3 players and 2 picks. So that was really unfortunate. I would have been interested to see how he would do in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Great picture here on the left of John Havlicek, who the Celtics fans talk about all the time. He played so long ago that I think he just wasn't in a lot of our consciousness, but he was on those great teams with Bill Russell and won a bunch of championships.
Mm-hmm.
So really great player there. And then this is a great picture of the Baltimore Capitol Bullets. They actually were called the Capitol Bullets because they were trying to represent Baltimore and D.C. This is before they actually moved to Washington, D.C. And you can see some legendary Bullets there on the team. Wes Unseld, Elvin Hayes, Kevin Porter, Mike Rurdin, Phil Chenier, and head coach K.C. Jones, who's a legendary coach, playing at the Capitol Center. Remember some of those Bullets teams?
Yes.
With Wes Unseld?
Yeah, sure do.
They were fun to watch. I was always rooting for them. They were definitely the first team I really followed in the NBA for sure.
Yeah, that's why we grew up kind of watching them.
They even had Mahorn for a while. They
Yeah.
pulled some guys in.
They had, you know who they had? They had Jeff Ruland and Rick Mahorn.
Yeah,
and
Ruland.
they were the Beef Brothers.
That's right.
And they used to play some hard defense.
They did. There were some pretty good teams.
Yeah.
They really were. The Capitol Bullets. I'd never heard of that before. I always thought of them as Baltimore or Washington.
Washington Bullets.
Mm-hmm. So here's on the top left, J.R. Reed for North Carolina. He was really a phenomenon. He was a little bit like, one of the big time guys you knew was going to be the number one pick. Then you have a great photo there on the bottom left. I love this photo of Michael Jordan going up for a layup with his tongue out, which was his signature thing when he was really concentrating.
Yeah.
We had no idea. We knew he was good at Carolina. We had no idea what he was going to become in the pros, And then look at this legendary team there in the middle with Kevin McHale, Isaiah Thomas, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, David Robinson, and I actually don't know who that is on the right there. But what an incredible, legendary group of folks there with all these different shoe deals.
Yeah.
What do you think of that crew?
Well, it was most of the dream team. I don't know. It was a very exciting time in basketball. There was definitely there wasn't much parity. I mean, it was the haves and the have-nots.
You had
And it
about
was really
14.
exciting watching the haves.
This is what Colin Cowherd talks about. You had about 4 teams that had a chance.
Yep.
And
And he
everybody
liked
else
that.
didn't. Yeah, that's right. He thinks the ratings were higher with that. And I'm with you. I think that it's better with parity. It's better where every city
Yeah.
feels like they have a chance.
The reason ratings are down has nothing to do with not having or having parity. It has to do with the style of basketball people are tuning out. And I think that's why there's more physicality coming back in, and they're making adjustments. I think they're doing a good job because they're listening to the fan.
That's right. It's interesting, this picture here with Shaquille O'Neal very early in his career. That's his second year out of LSU, playing for the Orlando Magic, and he was guarding Patrick Ewing, of course. And this was interesting what he said. He said, my father said, I'm going to make you like Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Wilt Chamberlain. And as a youngster, I used to practice all of those old school moves. And then one day I was watching Patrick Ewing at Georgetown. Big guy, mean, physical, throwing people around. I said, Dad, I want to be like that. And he said, I know. That's why I got you watching the game. So I'm watching Patrick Ewing. He wore number 33. And as I became better, I wanted to be like Patrick Ewing. And he was the first guy when I played against him I was actually intimidated by. So it's interesting to think Shaquille was intimidated by somebody, but he was when he played against Patrick Ewing.
I heard him tell a story the first time he played against Jordan. He was very intimidated. He said he was nervous.
Wow, I bet. Wouldn't
Yeah.
you be?
Yeah, he said that, that's the greatest player of all time. I'm going up against him.
But I could see him being intimidated by
20 years old or
Ewing.
whatever. What's
I
that?
could see him being intimidated by Ewing because Ewing was pretty
Yeah.
intimidating at that time. And he was a beast. So,
Yeah.
and then you got a picture there of maybe the greatest passer in NBA history, Magic Johnson with Showtime. The way he would run the break, I still have never seen anybody run a break like him. It was incredible. Of course, he had a lot of really great players to dish off to, but
Yeah, he had an all-star team, so I mean,
that's James Worthy right there. No, but you can't take away his skills
I don't
away
want to
from him.
take anything away from him, but
He was just a
boy,
magician.
you can't have the assists that he had unless people can finish,
But he had all the no-look passes and everything.
Yeah.
They must have practiced this in practice. I can't imagine how many
But
times because
the Lakers were loaded,
I know.
you know.
I know. Showtime Lakers. You always had Lakers Celtics, like almost every year.
Yeah.
Lakers Celtics.
And then you started mixing the Pistons, and then Jordan came along, and then it was the Bulls.
But I loved watching Magic and I loved watching Larry Bird. I think those two guys, they were super fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially against each other. They had such a good rivalry from college on.
That's true. They respected each other.
Mm-hmm.
Great picture there of the round mound of rebound. This was Charles Barkley. He said his philosophy was that you step in to take a charge against me during a game only once. Because when I committed that foul, I would genuinely try to kill you. So nobody ever stepped in twice.
Yeah.
He was an MVP. He was the shortest ever to lead the league in rebounds. 11-time All-Star, All-Star Game MVP, 5-time first team All-NBA, and a Hall of Famer and member of the Dream Team. So I do feel that way about Charles Barkley. He was somewhat shorter than most stars were, and yet he was fearsome as kind of a power forward at such a short
He
height.
was tough. Yeah, he was really tough.
How do you think he was able to have this incredible career, although he physically wasn't as big as some of the guys?
He was a hard worker when he was on the court. I don't think he had the best work ethic, but he worked so hard when the game was going, and he just became a nightmare to play against.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So April 2nd, 1975, Bob McAdoo of the Buffalo Braves was awarded the NBA's Most Valuable Player Award after averaging 34.5 points a game, 14.1 rebounds, etc. And so he was the first player named MVP outside of all the major programs and major franchises. So pretty interesting. And I know Bob McAdoo, I've always heard his name my whole life and how great a player he was. We didn't get a chance to watch him, but really cool to see that year that he won the award. Pretty dominant year. And then on the right there, of course, some people argue is the greatest center ever. It's really hard to say that because they all play in different eras, because he was playing in Wilt's era. But Bill Russell, and you can see him there with his 11 rings with the Celtics. I mean, where do you keep all these rings? I guess you have to have a safe or something.
Safety deposit box.
You have to. You have to. And then I guess he would probably pass these on to his kids and his grandkids, maybe. Maybe donate a couple to the Hall of Fame or something. But what a picture there. 11 rings. On the left here, you got Walt Clyde Frazier and Earl the Pearl Monroe. Had one of the most fascinating transitions from rivals to teammates. Before joining forces on the Knicks, Frazier and Monroe were fierce competitors. Frazier known for his defensive brilliance and smooth offensive game led by the Knicks, and then Monroe, a flashy, unorthodox scorer, was the face of the Baltimore Bullets. And then eventually both of them came together on the Knicks and did really, really well together. So kind of interesting when you have these guys that are long-term rivals and then all of a sudden they're on the same roster.
Yeah, they're some of the greatest ones.
I wonder what you say in your first meeting. I guess you sit down for lunch and just say, "Hey, look, we got to put all that behind us. We're teammates
Yeah,
now."
I mean, we're teammates. Let's make this happen.
Yeah. You got a picture there of Artis Gilmore. Had an incredible collegiate career at Jacksonville University. So a pretty cool picture there of him leading them to a title. And then Tiny Archibald. I thought this was an interesting picture of him. He was one of the top 5 point guards of all time, named in the NBA Hall of Fame, and yet they don't realize how short this guy was. He was 5'7".
Wow.
He was able to have that kind of career, Tiny Archibald. Yeah. Pretty cool to see him get his recognition. So other pictures here, Maravich. We've already talked about him a little bit, but this was pretty cool to see Maravich when he was Pistol Pete at LSU, the hottest shot. And apparently he had a very unorthodox jump shot, but was just deadly with it. He was SEC Player of the Year. He was All-American. He was Player of the Year for the entire country one year. So I thought that was interesting to see him, what he looked like as a college player for LSU. Daryl Dawkins there in the middle, doing one of the absolute muggings you were allowed to do back then, giving Bird an elbow. And what was funny is Bird's response was ice cold. The only way he could stop Larry Bird was fouling him hard every time when he drove to the basket. And Bird said, I remember he hit him with his elbow, and Bird said, "My mama hits harder than that."
Yeah, Bird was a big trash talker.
What a great response that is. Come on, man. That's all you can do? My mama hits harder than that. And what's funny is in this game, when he kept taking him out like that, Bird still scored 50.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going to stop him, you know. So, and then a great picture there of Jordan in one of his 2 comebacks. The second comeback, of course, he came back as part owner and player for the Washington Wizards. And that was his 40th birthday picture. So pretty cool to see. He was still in pretty good shape back then, could still shoot. Other great photos here. You got Magic Johnson. He learned the skyhook from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So you talked about a guy in LeBron James who could guard and play all 5 positions. Well, Magic could too. Matter of fact, he played center in a couple of games.
On offense, but he couldn't defend.
That's true. That is
He was
true.
a very mediocre to poor defender.
Very true. Very true. See a great picture there of Kareem being guarded by Ralph Sampson, who was a Houston Rocket. What a great picture that is.
Mm-hmm.
These 2 7-footers. And then the picture we looked at earlier with Wemby learning how to do the skyhook like his idol, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Great photo there of the Ralph Sampson when he won Player of the Year in college. And it was that year that he said, I'm waiting for you, Patrick. And that's the infamous game that you talk about that you and I got to attend with Dad.
Yeah.
Where we got to actually see him square off against Patrick Ewing. What an epic game. It was a national TV game and got one of the highest ratings ever.
Yeah, I was so glad we got to see that.
What an amazing game that was. And he won the Player of the Year that year. What do you remember from that game?
I remember Ralph Sampson ate Ewing alive.
Yeah, that's true.
Because he was a freshman and Sampson was a senior.
He was quicker. He was just quicker.
Yeah, and Ewing was young, and he got schooled by the veteran,
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember about that game. What a
Yeah.
matchup.
I just remember the same thing. But I remember Ewing did get his licks in sometimes too. It was just a great matchup. Look at this 1983 Playboy All-American team. You ready for this? Doc Rivers from Marquette, Dale Ellis from Tennessee, Patrick Ewing, Georgetown, Coach Terry Holland from Virginia, right there in the center, Sam Bowie from Kentucky. You had John Sunfeld, Missouri, Ennis Watley, Alabama, Michael Jordan, North Carolina, Sam Perkins, North Carolina, Keith Lee, Memphis State, and Ralph Sampson, Virginia. That's quite a team. These guys are all playing in the same year in college.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And what's pretty cool is their coach was Terry Holland. So really, really cool. Look how much taller Sampson is than everybody.
We were really clued into basketball at this point. This was huge for us.
Yeah, that's 1983. I told you I really became conscious really in 1980. Yeah. So I would be really at the swing of my really being interested in college and pro, really. Great picture here on the left of Duke's Mark Allery. I remember him very well going up against Sam Perkins, who's trying to block him. And then in the foreground is Michael Jordan and Kenny Smith. And Duke won that game 77-75. So this really was kind of a height of college basketball too. Think about all these great players on these college teams. Duke, North Carolina. Crazy.
Everyone stayed 3 or 4 years back then. You were, rewarded with that, with lots of playing time as a fourth year.
How loaded were these teams? Carolina, Duke, Virginia. They were just loaded. It's unbelievable. Great picture there on the top of Tim Duncan. I don't think he really gets as much credit as he should. He has a couple of rings. Really great player. Just kind of quiet, unassuming, but just kind of dominated the years that he was at his prime. Of course, Shaquille O'Neal in his Lakers days. Great picture there of Tracy McGrady guarding Dirk Nowitzki, who's also a really great player. One of the few European players at that stage that really came over and made a difference. Won a championship with the Mavericks. And then what about the Towers of Power picture? When Hakeem Olajuwon was drafted, and then 2 years later, in comes Ralph Sampson. And they essentially have 2 centers on the Houston Rockets. That just doesn't happen. Where you get 2 guys like that. So what do you remember about those Houston days?
Twin Towers, they called them. They were great, man. They played well together too. It was shortly after that Sampson started having knee problems.
Mm-hmm. I just remember it was fun to watch. You get both of those guys out on the floor like that, and there was nobody coming in the middle, I'll tell you that. So great picture there of Clyde Drexler, great Houston Cougars player. Also played for the Rockets.
He played with Olajuwon on that Houston team.
Boy, did he have a nice career. He really was good. So getting to the coaches, these are all the college coaches. You got Jim Calhoun. You got the UCLA team under Wooden had an 88 game winning streak. I mean, that's just astounding. 88 games. Coach K, Roy Williams. You got Dean Smith on the top right there. They're having a big celebration for him, by the way, this fall in Carolina. That's going to be really cool to watch. You got Tom Izzo, Michigan State. Rick Pitino, which he's now become the first coach in Division I history to win a regular season title with 5 different programs. Boston University, Kentucky, Louisville, Iona, and St. John's. That's pretty incredible. He just wins everywhere he goes.
Yeah.
Pitino. And then, of course, Coach Bobby Knight. Any others you can think of here? Tony Bennett, maybe? Jay Wright? There's other guys that could be on this list.
Wooden and Dean Smith, those are the two.
Who do you think's the greatest basketball coach of all time?
John Wooden.
I think it was Wooden. Yeah. It's kind of hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
Some people would say Coach K because he broke every record, but I think it's because he stayed 30-something years.
Yeah.
Dean Smith, hard to argue there too. Izzo, these guys are all just great coaches. It's really hard to pick, but yeah, I think if you're going to go with one, it'd be Wooden. I agree. Let's look at the pro guys. Okay, you got all kinds of great coaches here. You got Auerbach on the left with his. He always was smoking a cigar of some kind, which is really funny. You got Pat Riley. You got Steve Kerr, who's become a great coach. You got Popovich, who just retired. Was with the Spurs for a lot of years. You got Daly. You got Larry Brown. Who do you think was the best coach in this list?
Probably Phil Jackson.
You think it was Phil Jackson?
Maybe.
I think so because he did it with the Bulls. He did it with the Lakers. Everywhere he went, he won championships. Yeah, he had a lot of great players, but
and I know he had great players, but there's other coaches that had great players. They didn't win championships like that.
I think any of the triangle and ones. Yeah, I go with Phil Jackson as the greatest ever. Maybe Popovich second, or Auerbach maybe. Auerbach had all those titles. So interesting.
Pat Riley.
Pat Riley. He had a great career. It's been a really good GM too. Yeah, I go with Phil Jackson.
Championships.
Mm-hmm. Steve Kerr, maybe he's got 4 now.
Yeah, I don't know. Tough call.
So interesting here. Look at some of these all-star teams. Look on the left here. It's incredible to think this was the all-star team back then. Moses Malone, Marquez Johnson, Walter Davis. You got Larry Bird on that team. You got Bill Walton, Elvin Hayes. It's just Phil Ford, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It just goes on and on. Julius Erving. It just was loaded back then. It really was. So talent across the entire league. Magic Johnson, John Lucas, Gus Williams. Great picture there in the center of a whole lot of NBA greatness in the photo. You got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You got Wilt Chamberlain. You got Jerry West. Just like Hall of Fame. And then what a great several snaps here of they call it the shot. Virginia Miracle, where Diakite takes the ball from Kie Clark, ties the game against Purdue, and then they win it in overtime. And you see just the unparalleled joy of Diakite and his teammates, Kyle Guy. So what do you remember from that moment, man, and that whole run?
That run was wild because we were always down. Virginia was down by, 8 points with a minute and a half left, or 4 points with 6 seconds left or something. It looked bleak so much of that the end of each of those games, and
Those
they just
last three
made it happen.
games, those last three games they won, they were behind in all of them, and they needed. It wasn't miracles, but they needed tremendous comebacks and tremendous shots at the last buzzer to win these games, or free throws. It was just so exciting, man. I mean, I don't usually pace, but I was pacing during these games.
Oh,
I
me
couldn't
too. I
couldn't
couldn't
sit
stand it.
down. It was just crazy. You talk about exciting, man. Even if you didn't like Virginia or Purdue or any of these teams, as a fan, you just couldn't believe it. You couldn't believe what you were seeing. That Kie Clark going back, takes the ball with 2 seconds, whips it down the court. Crazy.
That's crazy.
Never going to forget it. So some of the draft classes, the 1991 NBA draft, you got Larry Johnson up there. You got Dikembe Mutombo. You got all these great players in 1991. I look at some of these draft classes and I'm like, wow, really unbelievable. And then 87, same thing. You got Robinson to the Spurs. You got Kenny Smith went to the Houston Rockets. You have Scottie Pippen. You have Reggie Miller. Of course, Muggsy Bogues goes to the Hornets. So what do you think about some of these draft classes they had back then? These are your top 15 players.
They had a lot of stars in the NBA back then.
Man,
Yeah.
crazy. You almost couldn't miss. I know they did, but
Well, these were almost all exclusively, seniors coming out, very established players.
and you're right, they did stay longer in college
They
back
were
then.
mature,
They did.
yeah, they stayed longer. And so when we started to go to the one and done era, you started to have kids coming out who had potential. And you started to get paid on potential instead of what you had done already.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So a great picture there of Rodman when he signed with the Bulls and joined Phil Jackson and the crew. He really kind of gave them that edge that they didn't have before. And he, of course, was one of the best rebounders in NBA history. He just was a rebound garbage collector. He just got everything. So it was a huge thing for them because they could get more possessions every game. Do you remember when he joined the Bulls?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was wild. That's what they needed. They needed a little edge and some rebounding.
They did, yeah, in that championship run, the last two. Most points in a game by a rookie. This was really interesting. Brandon Jennings of the Milwaukee Bucks was top with 55 most rookie points in a game. Allen Iverson 2, Trae Young 3, Michael Jordan 4, Kelly Tripucka, I remember him, Villanueva, Blake Griffin, Mitch Richmond, Shaquille O'Neal, and Joe Barry Carroll. So what a list of rookies there and top scoring numbers. So Jordan with 49 as a rookie. Pretty interesting. And then the last 15 NCAA players of the year. Of course, Cooper Flagg was this year. We had Zach Edey 2 years in a row. And you have a lot of other great players there. Zion Williamson in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts about these guys as they come out? Are they all can't misses? Or are there some that do miss? I mean, these players of the year, you would think that they can't misses, but it's not always true.
Most of them are can't misses.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them, though.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Some of those years that the player of the year came out, I think they were good players, but they probably didn't deserve a player of the year. But it just was kind of a weak year in talent. So.
Right.
Great picture there of Jerry Lucas. He apparently actually invented the skyhook, which was really cool to find out. He actually invented it when he was at Ohio State University. Nobody had ever really tried it before. And then, of course, it became a craze after that. So pretty cool that they're giving him the invented the skyhook label.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a really interesting picture. We're going to ask everybody who's watching tonight to give us your answer. You see Jordan there on the left with the Air Jordan, and the Nike Air Jordan shoes went on sale to the public in 1985 for $65. Nike sold $70 million worth of Air Jordans in the first 2 months of sale. An autographed pair of Air Jordans sold for $560,000 in 2020. In 2024, just this last year, the Jordan brand produced $7 billion in revenue, with Jordan earning $400 million in one season.
Wow.
He's making $400 million a year now, Robbie. So, what do you think of this great picture of him as a youngster?
It's cool because back then it wasn't clear how this was all going to play out, and the brand wasn't obvious. It was kind of a gamble.
He had just signed with them. Like that's
Yeah.
literally like he hadn't really started collecting yet. Now he's a multi-billionaire. And then some great pictures of him soaring. You had the Jumpman logo came from this one picture there in the center, which was during the dunk contest, and nobody had ever seen somebody do this before. He took off from the foul line and dunked,
Yeah.
literally like he was flying.
Yeah. It was one of those moments where you couldn't believe what you just saw.
And I think some people think he's the greatest ever just because of that moment, but I think if you really know basketball, you know why he's the greatest ever, in my opinion. But
Mm.
he put the slam dunk contest on the map. He made it actually interesting. So you got some great pictures here of LeBron with the Cavs and the Lakers and the Heat. So he's actually won championships with all three teams, which is pretty cool. And you can see all the different endorsement deals he's gotten over the years: Bose, Kia, Nike, Coca-Cola, Samsung. Um, and he actually just passed the $2 billion mark. So he's also a billionaire now. So thoughts about these two players, and then we're going to ask the subscribers this big question.
Well, I mean, we've talked about them. They're the two best ever, and just physical specimens, incredible athleticism. They could do things others couldn't, and they both have a lot of championships.
You know, it's interesting. I look at LeBron's physique, and he wasn't as jacked with the Heat, was he? He got
No.
more and more jacked later in his career. Maybe he's just trying to kind of push off father time, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I probably got into a tighter workout program.
All right, so Robbie, let's ask the question: who is the greatest ever, and give me the reasons why.
Michael Jordan. 6 championships, no losses in the championships. And I think he did it at a time where they were allowed to foul the heck out of him. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what kind of points he would have put up or stats he would have had if he could have had the protections that modern players have?
Well, he had to deal with it. Bird had to deal with it. Magic had to deal with it. All these guys,
Yeah.
you're right. They were in a different era of basketball than LeBron was. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, I'm with you. Michael Jordan, greatest ever. I have LeBron number two. And the reason is for a bunch of reasons. One, the era you talked about was very physical. He was getting tackled on his way to the basket half the time. But
Mhm.
also, he was way more clutch. I mean, when it came to, down 2 points with 2 seconds left and you had to have a basket, I'm going to Michael Jordan. I don't care what you
Yeah,
say.
that's right.
LeBron sometimes will hit it and LeBron will sometimes clang it. And he was just the most clutch performer, especially in the playoffs I've ever seen. It wasn't
Yeah, in
automatic.
basketball.
He was just clutch and dominant and the greatest player I've ever seen. And I think LeBron is number two. I'd put number three, maybe Kobe. I mean, Kobe was pretty darn dominant.
Yeah, or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
So, guys, drop us a comment. Do you agree with us? Is it Michael Jordan or is it LeBron James as the greatest ever? We're looking forward to your comments. So, interestingly enough, Michael walks away after 3 titles. Nobody could figure out why. He was in the prime of his career, goes and plays baseball for a couple of years. And then in 1995, he says, I'm back, and comes back into the sport and does something most people just don't do, which is to come back in the sport. And he's back at the top of his game and top of the sport. Comes back in as the best player again. So, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, you walk away for 3 years and you come back and you're that good still.
That was incredible.
And he wins 3 more titles.
An amazing feat. We couldn't believe it happened.
Yeah.
And yet when you watched it, it made total sense. He was that good.
That's right. Some other guys who made big comebacks, not like Michael though, but big comebacks. Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, both guys with the Magic. Both of them went through significant injuries to the point where they were out a couple years, but both came back and had nice careers. And then Derrick Rose, same thing. He was out for 2 seasons and was able to come back and make significant contributions to the Bulls. So pretty cool to see these comeback players. And then, of course, the 100-point game, Robbie, you mentioned this game. 100 points, 55 rebounds, and 21 assists for Wilt Chamberlain with the Lakers.
Incredible.
I mean, that it almost like feels like he was playing against a high school team or something. So do you think it was that? Was it that the competition wasn't as good? Was it that nobody was
Could you
playing?
imagine playing defense against him, how bad you'd feel?
That's right. But I wonder what it was. I mean, is it just that the competition wasn't as good? Was it that
Yeah.
he was absolutely on fire? Sometimes you're just in the
Competition
zone.
wasn't as good.
And he was on fire, I think.
And he was on fire.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So this is interesting. Basketball is an exhibition sport. On January 7th, 1927, without much ado, the Harlem Globetrotters played their first game. So that was 1927. That was almost 100 years ago. Traveling from Chicago to Hinckley, Illinois, they got their show on the road. This is the earliest known team photo of the Globetrotters from the 1930 to 1931 season. So what do you think about this Harlem Globetrotters that's been going for 100 years now?
I mean, it's just really fun to watch how they present basketball. It reminds me a lot of modern day banana ball in baseball,
Yeah, that's
the
right.
Savannah Bananas. It feels like baseball has copied the idea of the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah, you know, I wonder if every sport can incorporate something like this. I mean, can football do it? Can hockey do it? Clearly basketball and now
Maybe
baseball.
hockey, but not football.
You don't think?
No.
No. Great picture here of Goose Tatum in 1952 palming the ball. He was really good at kind of palming the ball and putting it behind his back. And then there's some other great pictures here of some of the modern Harlem Globetrotters teams. They're still traveling 98 years later. And then a great picture there of maybe the greatest Globetrotter of all, and that was Meadowlark Lemon from 1932 to 2015. And he was the clown prince of basketball, they called him. And everyone just generally agrees. Met multiple presidents and just entertained people for about 50 years playing basketball. So do you remember Meadowlark?
Yeah. Used to
So
watch it on TV.
he said that it brought him so much joy to make people happy. Like that's what it was about for him. He was a performer, you know. He was like a stage performer. This is the modern circus. So, evolution of the logos. You saw that NBA logo, 1949 today. This is what it looks like. This was interesting. Some of the logo history. The Golden State Warriors had some of the richest history. You can see what the Warriors used to look like. It was Indian Warriors back in the 50s. Then as it became more the city or San Francisco, then you had the Golden State logos, the Warriors, and then today you have that Golden State Warriors with the Golden Gate Bridge behind it. Any thoughts about some of these logo transitions? The Celtics.
No, it's interesting branding, you know.
Lakers started as the Minneapolis Lakers. They used to be in Minnesota, and then of course moved to Los Angeles. And this was interesting. The Bulls have never changed their logo since 1966. Been the exact same. So some franchises keep it the same. Some make it different because they want to sell T-shirts. So the Washington Wizards have one of the longest histories because they were the Baltimore Bullets and the Capitol Bullets and the Washington Bullets, and then of course the Wizards. You see what their logo looks like today. The Hawks also had a real long history of changes, originally being an actual hawk and then migrating into what they have today. And then, of course, the Hornets, my team, originally were Hornets, then they became the Bobcats and then went back to the Hornets. Really interesting to see these evolution of logos as they migrate. I think it does have a lot to do with merchandising, Robbie,
Yeah.
and trying to refresh your logo to make it more interesting. Popularity of the game in the USA in 2025, basketball continues to be a very popular sport. Sport also sees high participation rates among youth and high school athletics. Very popular choice for recreational activities. Basketball is a close second as the overall best sport. In the US, of course, football is first and then basketball, but globally it's soccer and then basketball. That's the global situation. In 2025, the NBA playoffs delivered the most watched opening weekend in 25 years. So we had that big dip for a while there, Robbie, when there was all the kneeling and other things going on, but you now have people returning to the NBA. Also, the WNBA has seen an increased viewership with some of their new players coming out of college. Basketball, also one of the most popular youth sports, with 36.8% of youth participating in basketball.
That's the thing. It's a great sport for parents who are worried about their kids getting hurt. There are very few career-ending injuries in basketball. It happens, but for the most part, it's a sport where you can sprain your ankle a little but be okay.
You said your
And
boys really like playing it, right?
yeah, boys love it.
31.95 million in 2024 played at least once a year in the US.
Hmm.
That's pretty amazing. So the growth is still there, and you see the ratings are also rising again. So I think basketball's in a pretty good spot right now.
Yeah.
Popularity of basketball around the world. Global basketball market projected to reach 11.32 billion in revenue in 2025, the most ever. The North American market, US, is the largest revenue generator. The market is expected to keep growing globally, although at a slower pace between 2025 and 2029. And in terms of fan bases, it's just absolutely exploding. There's 3.3 billion basketball fans now globally. Billion. So you're talking about a sport now that has really taken hold with the international tournaments and the Olympics and everything else.
They've done a lot of international outreach for sure.
Lucrative media rights deals are now in place globally. You have places like China and Spain and Greece and Germany where basketball is becoming one of the most important and regionally popular sports. There's all kinds of fashion trends now around basketball in these different countries. What are your thoughts about this? Is this going to continue to be a sport that continues to grow globally?
I think so for the same reasons. I think it's a good sport to get your kid into. It's enjoyable to watch. You don't have to be particularly good to pick up a basketball and go play a little bit. And they do a good job of pushing their stars, making people idolize their best players. And
There's the
think,
organized basketball aspect of it, but I also believe one of the reasons basketball is so popular globally is because it's so easy to play. You just need a ball and a
yeah,
hoop.
that's what I'm
And
saying.
you now have billions of hoops all around the world in almost every country on every playground in the world sitting there waiting to be used. And all you need is a ball. And it's not real expensive. All you need is a couple kids to play it. You can play 2-on-2, 3-on-3. And so people enjoy it. People enjoy it for exercise. And then eventually, when you play it recreationally for a while, you end up wanting to get into an organized situation. So,
Hmm.
but yeah. Some of the world competitions, you got the FIBA Basketball World Cup held every 4 years. You also have the Women's Basketball World Cup, the Olympic basketball tournament held at the Summer Olympics every 4 years. You also have all these different FIBA tournaments, Eurobasket, AmeriCup, Afrobasket. These are all regional tournaments that happen in between the Olympics. You got now the FIBA 3x3 World Cup and the under 17-19 World Cups. And then, of course, club competitions, NBA Finals, which are going on now, Euro League, FIBA Champions League, Intercontinental Cup, the FIBA Africa Clubs Championship, and then the WNBA. So you have all these opportunities now to compete. Any thoughts here?
It's pretty cool. A lot of growth internationally. For them to set up all these different leagues and championships is very good for the health of the game. It's going to produce players from all over the world that can come play together in the NBA. It's cool.
You have a theory about why so many European players and really foreign players have been making their way into the NBA and also dominating in the NBA. So tell the people what your theory is there.
Well, it goes actually Gino Ariyama is the one who said it. So I'm just really borrowing from him, but he said that basically American players are a little spoiled, and the best players get to kind of tell the coaches if they're going to play for them or not or whatever. At the end of the day, he said Americans are too worried about playing games and putting on a showcase, and European players are from the beginning taught fundamentals. And Americans will have maybe one practice a week and several games, whereas in Europe they'll have multiple practices and maybe one game. So they spend more time, and that's why you have a 7-footer from Latvia or something that can dribble, shoot threes. And our 7-footers are gawky and can't handle the ball at all because they're just working on playing and making a splash. And the European players are working on
So
fundamentals.
So you're
They
saying
practice.
European players, they practice the fundamentals more, they practice
Yeah.
in general more, they play less,
Yeah.
and then when they get to the game, they execute at a higher level because they've got so much more practice on fundamentals.
Right.
The other thing I notice about American players is they're all about flash. So it's about the dunks, it's about the high flying layups.
Dunking right in someone's face and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
it's about the runner.
Europeans are just about fundamentals, playing base, yeah, slapping the floor defense. They are work on their shot, work on their passing. The big men that come out of Europe, they don't look gawky. They're basically
Yeah,
all around players.
that's right. And the American players, they like to do runners and they like to take threes. Whereas the European players, they're doing the Euro step. They're trying to get close to the basket,
Right.
trying to get the high percentage shots. Yeah, I think your theory's right. I think it's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
So the NBA championship trophy is known as the Larry O'Brien Championship Trophy. Originally, it was named the Walter A. Brown Trophy and awarded to the winning team from 1947 to 76. The trophy was renamed in 1984 to honor Larry O'Brien, who served as the NBA commissioner from 75 to 84. The new design was introduced in 1977, and the Larry O'Brien Trophy has been awarded to the NBA champion ever since. You see the picture of the trophy there on the left. So thoughts about where this trophy ranks, and I know we've talked about this a couple of times, but compared to the Lombardi Trophy, compared to the Stanley Cup, compared to the baseball trophy, where do you rank this one?
I think it's second to the Stanley Cup.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
I like the Lombardi Trophy to be second. I'd probably put this one third and baseball fourth. I think the Lombardi Trophy is pretty epic. But this is a pretty good one.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, well, let's go watch some classic highlights of classic basketball from the Sports Guys, and we'll be right back.
Here we got a dribble drive, change of direction by Bryant. I think that's what Brown wants him, puts up the two-pointer, puts it in! Jeremy Lin with 31! How about Jeffries, another rebound. Lin from three, bang! Oh my gosh. You win, young fella! You win, Superman! Anthony for three. Bang! That one goes down, and the game is tied. Anthony for three. Puts it in! Next by one with 8.2. Adams going long. Morant for three. And he got it. And it's 105-102. And a steal. Miller retreats to the three-point line. And hits it again. Again, fires it cross court. Jeff's got it right up into the alley. Power slam. Tomahawk Sam. Yeah, baby. Into Lister's. A long three for Thompson. Again, it is Iguodala. Thompson fires for three. Yes. Golden State by three. And you know what's interesting about that? He was trying. Oh, grab! Count the bucket for the win.
Thomas, Wade with a steal, with two. Wade puts it up for the win. Yeah, baby! He did it! He did it! Dwayne Wade with the steal and the game winner.
Hunting. Play on the out of bounds. Tell you a story about that in a second. Plays three. Play corner three. 60. He's put it in too. He's bullied. Shaquille.
Incredible opportunity.
Durant for three. It's good. Kevin Durant from downtown. And Golden State takes the lead. Bryant. To shot. Seconds left. LA is outscored. 7 to shoot. Nowitzki drives with an underneath lefty layup. Banks it in. Dallas has tied the finals. One of the most incredible comebacks.
From Jermaine O'Neal got a piece of it.
And they do. Ball knocked away, stolen by Parker. Here comes George to Kobe Bryant. Bryant inside. It's good. It's good. Tie game. Myers for Pippen. Oh, a faithful Scottie Pippen in the face of Patrick Ewing, who did not appreciate it.
Lewis gets it to LeBron for three for the win. Yes! LeBron James at the buzzer as the Cavaliers.
Is going to be stolen, I think, by the doctor. Yes, he's got it. Here he comes. Ray rocked the baby to sleep and slammed up. And yet another Laker turnover.
They get it to Fisher. He scores! Fisher scores at the buzzer.
We got to take a look at it, but I got to tell you, live it looked good.
Lonzo Mourning changing a shot.
This lead of 8. Miami's largest of the game, but talk about large. How about that slam dunk from Vince Carter? What body control and what...
Mascot.
Steps over to Ron Lewis. Like he was dead in the water. The Sixers by 4. Quickly, up the court. Brooks to Green. Oh, did he go up the ladder? Iverson has Jordan. The crowd is into it. Allen shakes free. Gets two. Take a look at the crossover. Mike said no. Allen said yes. The bucket, the crowd.
7-1 on the road against the 70s.
Oh, my!
Play of the day for the Heat.
It's a physical game. Oh, my! A monster jam by Blake.
That's got to be a 50 by. He took off just a little inside that free throw line, one-handed double.
And the second overtime. James for three. Yes! And the game is tied. 5 seconds. 4, 3. James scores with 2.2 to go. Right here is Vince Carter with his first shot. Let's go home. Bryant on the move with the jumper. He got it! 58 points.
Jordan. Jordan to the circle, puts the shot in the air. Good! The game's over, and the Bulls have won.
Tucker on him. Throws it up for 8. Shot blocked by Antetokounmpo. What a block from Giannis.
Kobe Bryant, 28 for 46 from the field. This would be 18 for 20 from the line and an 81-point game.
5 seconds to go. Magic with a hook shot. Scores with 2. And the Celtics trail by 1 with 2. Reed from behind takes it away. Chalmers. Oh, James! Whoa!
Now it looked like he jumped out of the mezzanine.
Now there's a steal by Bird. Underneath the DJ, lays it in. Right at 1 second left. What a play by
Lillard, long range 3. It's good! At the buzzer! Damian Lillard! Cross-court pass. Oh! Antetokounmpo throws it down. As Middleton lobbed it up perfectly. And there's your highlight. Defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger? Irving and Curry, one-on-one. Irving puts it up. It's good! Kyrie Irving from downtown! And the Cavaliers might. The 3 won't go. Rebound box. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Tie game with 5 seconds remaining. Iguodala to Curry. Back to Iguodala. Up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. LeBron James with the rejection. Wow. Jordan. Open. Chicago with the lead.
A sick crossover. Look at Brian Russell slips. And Michael pulls up and buries the shot to give him a 1 point.
Brown lost it. Here comes McGrady. No timeouts remaining. McGrady for the win. Yes! And the Rockets steal a game from the Spurs.
All right, Robbie. Well, final thoughts, man. What do you think about basketball, the history of it, the rules of it, the popularity of the game globally in the U.S. seems to be rising again? Final
I
thoughts?
love where basketball is headed. I think we're back to all the positives of the athleticism and the pretty high scoring, adding in a little bit less threes and maybe a little more physicality to kind of bring that back a bit. I think that kids are playing it as much as ever. They've gotten rid of one and done for the most part in college. So players will stay longer now with NIL. And that's good for the development of the game. They arrive in the NBA with a bigger brand. They arrive in the NBA with more skills, more life skills, more maturity, so that they immediately, as rookies in the NBA, start in a better place than all these people trying to come out straight from high school.
It's true.
I think the game's in a good place. I think the 3 found its correct place in the whole thing, and I think it's diminished slightly from where it was, and I think that's the right balance.
You know,
So I like it.
I remember all the videos of guys like Phil Jackson and Dean Smith and Tony Bennett and Jay Wright and all these guys calling a timeout and drawing up a play, doing the X's on the little board in front of them.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a little bit more of that in the last 2 years, both in college and pro. There's more X's and O's, there's more plays being called, timeouts at strategic times. I like that. I think that's a huge part of the game we were missing for a while. They were just letting it flow. They, in a lot of cases, weren't calling timeouts. They weren't drawing up plays. And I like to see some of the strategy come back in the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Phil Jackson used to run what was called the triangle and one. And, you know, that kind of strategy was really big back then. It was a big part of the game, the flow of the game.
I'm really excited about the parity in the game. I'm not a big fan of the dynasties always winning. I don't think that's good for the long-term health of the league. I know you could make the argument that the league was at its best when it had the Lakers versus the Celtics, et cetera. But I really like that it would be great if every year 2 different teams went to the championship and your city could get real excited. And, the
True.
parity is a good thing, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape in basketball.
Me too. Guys, drop us a comment what you think of the state of basketball, what you thought of the episode. And Robbie, my last question to you is, what do you think James Naismith would think of the game today if he saw it? He wouldn't believe it, would he?
I don't think he'd believe it. I think he'd be very excited that something that he put so much into took off as much as this did. Some of the stars that have played it over the last 40, 50 years have really set it apart and honored the game with their athleticism and skill level. And
Rob, he was throwing what was in effect a rugby ball into a peach basket with his students. And
wow.
If he saw that dunk by Jordan from the foul line, he wouldn't believe that.
Yeah.
Nobody would believe that. He'd be like, what is that? So really exciting. And guys, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. We have a lot of great content coming your way. Really glad you joined us on this journey down memory lane on basketball, one of the great sports and one of the all-American sports. So thank you guys so much. And we'll see you guys next time on the Sports Guys.
We'll see.
Have a great one.
Check out